So IP could be anything. IP could be a virtual fashion show to maybe a makeup event, right? IPs are very important part of brand building because you're sometimes known more by your IPs than the brand name itself. And then numerous examples. Red Bull is a classic example. Red Bull is more of an IP than just a energy drink. Red Bull is more of a brand sending a person to space and asking to drop off than just asking people to drink energy drinks. A Red Bull gives you wing.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Stars and Startups with me, Varun Vumidi. Today we're changing it up a little bit. We have a guest who's not a founder of a company, but a dear friend of mine, Hitesh Malhotra, who currently is a Chief Marketing Officer at Nykaa.com. We chat about our careers, what Hitesh has been up to at Nykaa, and most importantly, we discuss how direct consumer brands should look at marketing at this time. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel wherever you're listening to this podcast. That way you can get notified whenever I release a new episode. Trust me, the next 5 episodes are going to be bonkers. You don't want to miss it. Now, on to the show.
Awesome, man. Hi, Hitesh. How's it going? Welcome to Stars and Startups.
Hi, Varun. I'm very happy to be here because I've lived with you for a very long time in Bombay. I've discovered my career early on while you were discovering yours back in Jabong. And, about 8 years later, talking to you over here on a podcast. Good fun.
Absolutely.
Good times
So
together.
if you remember, these, picture frames are from our home. So it's a little piece. So from all my podcasts, this is the first one that features this backdrop. So I wanted
it should be a last one. Don't use it anywhere else. It's our special.
I wanted to inaugurate it, right? Like if I get good reviews for this backdrop, maybe we'll continue with it.
Maybe.
There are not that many spaces I can go to in this house to actually record. So, so Hitesh, you brought up a very interesting point, right? We started our careers, at around the same time, at least our second innings, right? And it was a learning experience for the both of us, and we've come, I think it's exactly 10 years or just about 10 years.
Now 9 years, I would say. 11 was when they was the time when they actually were hunting the name, what to name the company.
That's right.
It was a rocket venture that time, and then suddenly this name Jabong came out, which is based on some fruit in Caribbean islands. But yeah,
I still remember I was working on the logo that we were creating, and I was coordinating with our partners at that time, agency partners, and I was giving the brief and how it should come, and all of that. We done a lot of work, and then we got just one option from Berlin at that point, and we're like, scrap all of that, we're going with that, right? So it was in a way nice because you kind of get told what to do, but also you spend all the time trying to figure out what you want for your brand, for your baby. So that was a great experience. I think we learned a lot. I think you and we worked closely as well at that time, and it's amazing to have seen what you've ended up doing since then, because in between you were not in e-commerce, right? You spent a lot of time doing different things, real estate, travel, and probably even an
agency, even an agency.
That's right.
Right. So
go ahead. I'd love to understand, what is that path and what brought you back to
e-commerce? E-commerce happened because I was in the US prior to Jabong, and I was with Levi's. I was interning over there, and I was very fascinated with how people were shopping online, right? And I was in a territory which was a little more advanced back in 2011, where people will actually select a pair of jeans online, customize it online, and then just go to the store to collect it. So it was a very fascinating model, the way they worked, and the focus on content and digital. And I went into a dream world, and I said that if this is going to be the way that people transact, so India is not far off. So and that time then, Jabong happened, Rocket ventured into India, and the company started. Even in those days, they were doing outstanding numbers. They were like literally had no competitor. They were like several other websites that were selling fashion, but nobody was doing business the way Jabong was doing. But somewhere in the middle, I realized that there is a very, a typical formula way to how digital marketing was happening in India. It was not innovative enough, right? There was a dependency on the affiliates. There was a dependency on discounting. There was a dependency on sale. So I just thought that, is it going to give me a complete value addition as a marketer, or maybe I should explore more? And then the move to Make My Trip happened, which was in India, probably the most digitally advanced company that time, right? Because they had a good legacy. They started early on, in early 2000s. So obviously they had little more knowledge about digital. And even Make My Trip was purely performance digital-led company with very little focus on content. So I joined at a time when it was right at the influence where the content started becoming important. So, the content team came into picture. I was doing the social media marketing that came into picture. So we were doing Google search ads along with social media ads. In those days, Facebook did not have the newsfeed inventory. So they used to give the right inventory, which is right-hand side ad, which would probably give you a click rate of less than 0.1%. So again, you start questioning, is this the way that things are going to work? Right? So that's the second, I would say, phase of digital marketing all over the world, where slight bit of performance steps in, and then people go to social media and you start seeing ads on the right hand side. And again, nobody knew how to monetize Facebook. Then from there, my next learning experience kind of happened with an agency, which was basically into PR and content. But it taught me a lot about, how to create campaigns, how to holistically prepare campaigns, and how to step out and put communication angle to the campaigns, right? Because then, the communication became so, cluttered that, you could really not stand out. So my stint at MSL kind of told me that what is the power of communication, good imagery, good creative, and, outstanding, delivery, channel deliveries, all of that put together, each of these places became like a learning school of marketing for me, right? So I had to pick up a lot of things from Jabong, which is basically getting into digital. Make My Trip is basically how to earn money on digital, get to efficiencies which you can afford. And then MSL was finally that, how to create beautiful campaigns, holistic campaigns. And I think all of that I could, blend it, juice it, and, present it in Nykaa. So that kind of worked in my favor. Luckily, I joined a company, Nykaa, which was, a lot into beauty, and beauty is the aspiration as well as education. So all the things that I kind of learned in the past, helped me. So it was like a slumdog millionaire moment, that guy sitting on the chair probably didn't know the answers to any of the questions, but he had life experiences related to each of the questions. So I would probably relate a lot to that moment, that when I joined Nykaa, I did not know how to sell makeup. I did not even know what kind of makeup there is. But every single thing in my life in the previous job kind of started finding its angle inside this job of Nykaa. So it really helped me out.
What's
so
impressive?
I would say I was lucky.
What's impressive, Hitesh, is you don't typically have. I mean, you typically have a lot of men who handle digital sales, and offering a beauty brand to as a CMO of a beauty brand to a male individual, they must have really trusted what you brought to the table, and you've actually proved that. But coming to the gender aspect of it, I believe you had an all women's team.
I mean, say team of 31, 29 women, 2 guys. So you can call it almost an all women team. Yeah.
So did you immediately realize that you needed to have that perspective in the team, and that drove a lot of the decisions?
So Varun, there are 2 things. One is that Nykaa is founded by a woman, Falguni Nair. So it has this very strong culture of encouraging women to take up ownership and participation in business, right? So that is the DNA of Nykaa, right? That's a value system. Now what happens is like attracts likes. So if Nykaa's DNA or value system is like that, even the people perceive it, especially women, perceive it as a company where they think they will be treated equal. So when I used to get these applications, I've kind of recruited most of the people through LinkedIn in my team. I could identify the confidence and the alpha membership, I would say, in their conversations, right? You could figure out an alpha talking to you, somebody, you would get application that, look, I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now, but I'm so excited by your brand that if given a chance, I will prove out to be your best resource. And if I'm not able to prove myself in 3-4 months, you can take a call. I know it's a difficult world. Now, it's very rare that a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old lady just out of college, or business school is able to write such strong statements, especially without any prior knowledge of e-commerce marketing. So you would want to take your bets on that, right? So the women, they had natural penchant towards the product, the makeup products and the grooming products. On top of that, digital marketing was really, really, booming back in 2015, that everybody wanted to learn that. So I think a combination of these two really, strong reciprocation from women audience members, who thought that, okay, this is their moment to shine. And I think it was a brilliant decision in hindsight to have so many women in the team, because they already come trained with the product knowledge. They love products, and secondly, the element of right brain comes in so strongly when the left brain uh, campaign mix. So you have questions of CTRs, or effective CPC, or effective return on ad spends on one side. On the other side, you have these brilliant minds and brilliant eyes that could differentiate that why a creative is bad and why a creative is like really, really good, right? So in generally in digital marketing that I worked in previous jobs, very little tweaks would be made to creative, and most of the tweaks would have been made to budgets or the bids, right? Then the world changed. Bids became automated, right? The machine learning angle came into picture. So Google and Facebook became big. They had their outstanding machine learning sitting in the center, and you really did not have to uh, be awake all night and keep changing bids like you would do typically on a stock market chain. So that means that is thrown out of the box, right? So now comes budgeting, and then the creative. And again, budgeting is largely a factor of what is your appetite, right, to take risk. So in the end, if you do not have the right eye, even in digital marketing, to differentiate what creative will appeal to people or what communication will speak for itself, I think nothing can work. What I got on my table was these brilliant set of ladies who could identify that faster than anybody else, and show remarkable results with slight changes.
So what you're also saying is that because a lot of the data crunching is done by, firstly, I'm guessing you do some analysis on your side, which is more effective. And then the rest of it is done programmatically, which is also what has probably changed in the last decade in online advertising, right? Can you contrast that with say 5 years ago and prior?
Yeah. I remember in Jabong and Make My Trip both, the concept of changing bid was an overnight process. So you would run a campaign for a week, look at the performance, and Monday of every week, you would subsequently be awake in the night, because that is the time when your changes would take place, based on the Pacific time. And you would have to literally change the bids on every single ad. So remember, there are thousands of ads, then there are hundreds of ad sets, and then there are tens of campaigns, right? So changing the bids at the ad level, which is such a difficult job and such a strenuous and laborious job, to make an impact at the campaign level. Now, what today has happened is that, the programmatic and the machine learning element has started optimizing ads for the amount of return on ad spends that you really aim for, or the cost per click that you're willing to give for that impression. So I think that is a big change right now. So basically, all these tools and all the developers like Facebook and Google kind of gave a message that as a marketer, your job is not to be running after the bids, but your job is a long-term goal, that what is the cost of acquisition you want to maintain for your customers, and what is the return cohort you want, right? So if you make a purchase today from Nykaa, how many times would you come back in the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and so on? So your lifetime value will no more be the element of number of purchases you make in a year, but your lifetime would be far beyond that. And how long can I retain? So, now the next step is that LTV will not be the main concern. Now the main concern will be loyalty. So which means that out of 100 people who have shopped with you, how many people would you be able to retain in next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? And loyalty is going to be such a big aspect post-COVID, because, there will be trust deficit in terms of how are you sending the product? Is your warehouse sanitized? Are your delivery guys completely following protocols? And secondly, that is your sourcing in place, your supply chain is in place? Are you getting the right product at the right time? Are you selling stocks which are about to expire? So amidst all this, I think the future is a lot going to be about, your supply chain optimization. At the same time, how you really, get the loyalty aspect out of customers.
So
right?
Just a quick one.
It's a very easy statement. People say that, loyalty doesn't exist. I don't believe in that. I strongly disbelieve. I think loyalty is there, but you have to do your part.
So, what do you think is the relationship between loyalty and LTV? Because in my mind, I would think that it is similar or the same, because loyalty results in lifetime value, longer lifetime value, right?
I'll give you one example. So, Varun, a lot of loyalty programs work on the purchase value that you derive from a customer in a year. Okay. So, for example, you come to a website. So, I'm owner of website ABC, and I say that anybody who's made purchases more than 6,000 rupees in a year is my loyalty member and will get loyalty benefits like free delivery or discount coupons or birthday coupons and free gifts and blah blah blah. Now, imagine two conditions. You come on January 1st. You come with three friends of yours who say, Varun, can you please order perfume for me? I am running out of time. So you make an order of 6,000 rupees and you don't show up till 31st December of the same year. Versus, say, your sister who comes 10 times to Nykaa or any website and makes purchases worth 600 rupees each time. Now, technically, LTV wise, both of you are at 6,000. You and your sibling, both of you, right? But are both of you actually loyalty members? No. What happened with you was a phenomena, right? Your friend needed a bottle of perfume with the cost of 6,000. You just ordered for him and you disappeared. And you went to a competitor website. And say your sibling is buying 10 times or totaling up to the value that you just derived in January of that year. Mm-hmm. Now, in typical definitions, both of them qualify under the loyalty program, which is faulty. It's not true. Because you looked at the LTV and LTV is same. It's a 6,000 rupees LTV, but it's a completely different behavior. Which means I can bet a lot more on your sibling who's purchased 10 times in the next 5 years rather than you. Because you did that one shopping on January 1st and you said buy. That's it. Finish. So I think this is where the finer definitions will come in. That in LTV, instead of just looking at the amount of purchases, every single aspect of, recurring purchases or the nature of purchases or the net margins that you save per customer order or profitability per purchase of that customer will kind of get angled into loyalty. And I think that these few, KPIs will decide the success of the company. Remember, India has had major problems with returning customers. And I'm not talking about
repeat users.
Repeat users. I'm just not talking about, big businesses who are burning cash. I'm also even talking about, general retail businesses. And the answer to that is not discounting, actually. The answer to that is one-to-one customer service or one-to-one support, no question asked returns, ensuring 2 or 3 days delivery, or being very polite on phone when the customer calls in, one click hotline, so many aspects, right? And all of that has to, kind of bottle into a package and that's how you can sell it to customer and the loyalty comes in. I remember when you were in Jabong, you started the concept of no question asked returns. That was the beginning of it, but are people generally doing it today? No.
I mean, I think there's a lot more focus on profitability, and that has changed how people look at different offerings, right? And it's a very hard balance to also bring in. It's very easy to launch some of these tools, and everybody wants to do it. But once you start looking at how it impacts your bottom line, see, the reason why we launched a lot of those services at that point was we wanted to give a new to web customer, and if you remember, even online payments was new in a way. So that was the beginning of commerce, and we have seen all of that, and we wanted to give comfort to the customer to want to be able to shop online. And I believe those were tactics you had to use to bring and drive transactions, right? What can the customer service do, etc. is it's a joint effort how you build that. Given your thoughts on what you just said, at the time that we live in with COVID, I believe the new world order is going to look like where going out is optional, right? If you look at buying any products, earlier was luxury. Can I show off with this? How will people look at me? Even beauty, right? Because you go out and you want to show that you're because that's the only opportunity you get for other people to see you. How do you see that kind of playing out when you're just probably doing a grocery run or something else? Because I mean, even weddings.
Yeah, so essentially, you're saying that what is the future of? So you kind of asking what is the future of non-essential business, right? I mean, eventually, the world will be divided into essential and non-essential, right? So everything that you need to survive is essential: food, groceries, fuel or whatever. And non-essential is that whatever you till now considered as a snob value, or maybe a thing that you can live without. Now comes a critical point, right? That and this is where human minds are tested. Um, the definition of essential and non-essential, Varun, is very, very extremely personal, right? It is impossible to generalize it. And I'll tell you how. Some people would say, for me, water is not essential. For me, beer is essential. Some people will say, for me, or riding a luxury car is not an essential, non-essential. It's essential. I cannot drive a car which is not automatic because I'm used to it. I cannot, go anywhere without putting a kajal on because I just feel I look very pale. I cannot step out of my house wearing dull colored clothes because I think I look fat in it. I cannot, talk to anybody without wearing my favorite perfume because I just feel that, I'm not smelling good. It is so personal that putting a layer of, general human needs is virtually impossible, right? There has been an age-old jokes where, the princess says that, why give them, bread when there is cake, right? So that kind of became joke that why eat bread when you have cakes. But somewhat it is true. Your definition of essential, non-essential is very personal and it is taboo, right? So all of us are under the societal pressure to not open up our mind in the fear of somebody will come and crush us, that in the time of COVID, when people are suffering and thousands of migrant workers are walking home and getting crushed and, they're dying on the railway track, how can you really think about these things? But they will not talk about it, but you cannot drag it out of their minds, right? Especially talk about Generation Z, kids born after 1998. They are the internet generation, right? They're born with an Instagram in their hands and have they seen what's happening around the world. So for them, living up to their global standard of life is essential, right? Be it the internet or be it the branded clothes they want to buy or be it the PlayStation game they want to get into, engage with friends. So it is a very personal thing, and I think you cannot put a layer on top of it. And India will remain a country of demand, right? I do not know about infrastructure. I do not know about government policies. I do not even know about, bank lending. There's only one thing I know, Varun, that India will be a country of demand because of the aspiration. Because we'll always be at a stage that, we want to be developed. We'll never be a developed nation because we've reached a population scale where it's virtually impossible to, now discipline everything into a developed way of living. We cannot. So there is always this, North Pole star, which we'll be chasing all our lives, that we want to be better off and live like a Sweden or an American, right? That chase or that wild goose chase is always going to keep the demand burning. So the good thing in India is that maybe you start a business and the policies are not in your favor or the lending is not in your favor. The only thing in your favor is if the product is liked by people, there is business in it.
So what you're saying, what you're saying is that there is still space to create a lot more brands and to build a lot more online businesses. But I'm curious, would marketing in general change? Because I would imagine there is an offline online element to it, right? And the offline being not just advertising and campaigns, but also the value that you show that, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm primarily saying now that, it's like you define it, essential, non-essential. Even if it's essential, non-essential, and I want to purchase it, but the values of why I would wear it, where would I use it, how would other people see me in it, would that change?
There's gonna be a lull of about 6 months, I would say, where people will work on what the perception of other people. But again, they will go back to their carnal instincts. Everybody, the human instinct is that my demand and my needs are very personal, and I will fulfill it in any way possible. Self-maximization is the first virtue of being human, right? So 6 months, because there is so much media talking about COVID and there is bad news, there would be this lull period. Post 6 months, people will go to their basic instinct and they would want to buy whatever they want to buy. So that's like always going to happen. That is first thing. And the second thing is that, as I said, that demand, which I was talking about, right? Essential versus non-essential demand. There was a time when a lot of people moved out of poverty and they came into the middle class spectrum. And, you could see a lot more smartphone sales happening, a lot more electronic item sales happening, right? And you could see this phenomena. Now, people have to think differently, right? You were talking about marketing has to think differently. Yes, it has to. And I've been, yelling my lungs out for the last 3 years that the traditional way of mainline marketing is dead and buried. It cannot be useful anymore, right? So when you go to large FMCG corporations, and I've counseled a lot of them, I've consulted a lot of them, in my job. They're still looking at definition of NCCS-A, NCCS-B, which is basically again built on a very archaic system of, if you have a refrigerator at home, your NCCS-A. If you have an automobile or two-wheeler, your NCCS-B, whatever. It is so archaic,
for somebody
right?
who doesn't know what that means, what is NCS?
So basically, SCCA or NCCS is basically traditional definition of what segment of affluence customer is in. So what earlier people would do is, anybody living in metro cities would by default get this A, or let me keep the words NCCS away. Those are all weird jingles. But say section A, right? Metro cities, and then non-metros would be B. Then people started seeing that in smaller cities in tier 3, tier 4, affluence started coming in. People are buying more automobiles. You see larger number of Mercedes Benz in Ludhiana versus say a Bangalore, right? So then they said, okay, that's not the right definition. We'll look at the household goods own and the automobile own, and we'll start making definition of people, right? And basis that, the audience were clustered and they were divided, and then there were these research agencies who would come in the middle. They would pick a set of very handful of people to represent the larger base. They would do the surveys, and then they would put the characteristics. So for example, a research agency would go to Ludhiana and say, okay, let's do a survey about NCCS-A people. So they would pick up 11 people who own a Mercedes, and they would ask them, hey, how much are you educated? They would say, oh, I studied till college, first year or 12th. And then they would make it as a baseline standard that most of the NCCS-A people or SCCA people have not done college. So which means, there is no way you can sell an education app in those cities, right? Now, which is such bullshit approach to, a lot of things. The only truth today about a customer is the kinds of content she or he utilizes or watches. That there is nothing, no bigger truth than that truth. If there is a way you can understand the content consumption of your audience, what is her or his relationship with the media, you're pretty much on the right track to understand what he or she is likely to buy, right? For example, a lot of people say that TikTok is becoming big, but it's still consumed by people who are not going to become shoppers. It's still consumed by people who do not have financial independence and or the affluence to buy online, right? Maybe that's a phenomenon.
TikTok is a very interesting example, right? Because
ultimately, but people said the same thing about, but the same thing was to be said about Facebook.
Of course,
the same thing was to be said about Orkut, right? It's the same pattern, right? The early adopters of each of these were ridiculed every single time, right? Because people in large do not understand it. Right? I personally do not like TikTok, but I know that there is an audience or a customer base sitting there who are going to utilize 6 hours in a day watching TikTok.
Right. I mean, of course, there is an argument to be made that, it takes a certain amount of time for those users to become consumers and paying consumers.
It's every platform. So did Facebook. I just told you the right-hand side units were quite shitty.
Right.
We're talking at 0.07 CTRs. So it took Facebook a good period of 2010 to 15 to launch newsfeed ad, which was a product launched by one of the interns in Facebook, to finally monetize Facebook to a $100 billion giant that is sitting today.
Sure, but I was aligning with the fact that the online shopper on a Facebook were used to transacting across the web at that time, which basically resulted in ads also converting. So a TikTok user, you probably classify them, the way you classify them is new to web, in the sense they're just getting used to it. And I believe the research shows that a lot of them are, they've come online because of the new telecom player, right? And the new telecom player has been around for about 2.5, 3 years now. And now these customers are starting to become a lot more adept at using online tools, which will then result in them also being convinced to, say, put up their debit card or make an online transaction or a UPI transaction, right? Which will result in transactions. So there is an alignment with what, sorry, I'm bringing up payments because that's dear to me.
No, but that's the thing. Most of the TikTokers have come online because of the online payments, not because of TikTok. They are the people who came online because of Paytm during demonetization. They came online because of PayU or Razorpay or all these people to start transacting online and making payments to wallets, right? Because they were one of the biggest, recipient of the demerits of demonetization, right? Let's be honest about it. They are not the credit card generation, not the debit card generation. They are the cash generation. So the onus of getting them online doesn't go to TikTok, but it goes to online payments.
So we'll circle back to TikTok quickly. We referred to a lot of brands being created at this time, and going back to your segmentation of the audience, it's become common knowledge now that India is not categorized in Sec A, Sec B, and Sec C, and whatever else. There are so many layers to the audience. Hence, the thesis in the investing world and in entrepreneurship, they're seeing a lot of different brands appeal to different segments of the Indian population. Hence, brands are being created on Amazon, brands are being created via Myntra, Snapdeal, whichever other websites that are there. And that's called the direct to consumer brands, generally because they don't want to go the offline route. There's an argument to be made where a lot of online brands are now going offline, but there are a lot of brands being created online as well to reach this audience. So this direct to consumer phenomena has started to take place, and I think a lot more space is there. There's a lot of products yet to be created. If somebody were doing this now as I would believe marketing would play a huge role in creating, because that's the only voice, right? Because you have no store, you have no experience offline. So all the online experiences is what creates this brand. From your experience building brands and doing marketing, how would you say a direct consumer brand should look at the future, and what should be like maybe marketing 101 for them?
So three very basic principles, very, very basic principles. Basically, at the cost of sounding repetitive, right? Because I say this in a lot of conferences, and this is one of the value system on which the corporation I work for right now is built on, right? So basically, it's very, very clear, and they say that when you're direct to consumer and you're launching there, there are three things that should define you. Number one, obviously, is your curation, right? So curation does not only mean that what are you listing, but curation also means that the product that you create, what is the ingredient in that which is needed by the market, right? A lot of examples we see in Nykaa private label cosmetics is because it does bridge the gap between Indian customers wanting international brands and not able to buy international brands, but are fascinated with Nykaa cosmetics because it does carry a lot of amazing features that the international brands have, be it the formulation or the color offering and all, right? So I think curation is really, really important. Second comes the content. Content, a lot of people plug it into marketing, but I would say content, it'll be its own backbone, because the good content will be discovered on its own, right? So I don't want to use the word virality, but I just want to use the word that it becomes a part of popular culture, right? So curation and content are step one and step two, which is like absolutely important. And the third and final step, which I really talked about and I discussed briefly at the start of a call, is cohorts, right? Cohort is that even if I get 10 customers today, am I strong enough to get 7 out of them back next month? Now the question is not about getting 100 customers today, because if I get 100 customers today and 2 come back next month, I'm still weaker than the guy who got 10 customers and got 7 of them back. So in these 3 systems, if you can set up a global KPIs for your corporate or for your brand, and those common systems across all different teams, you could make a very strong headway today, right? I have enough examples of brands who are touching revenues of upwards of 10 crores in the first year of their launch, because they were able to focus on, curation, content, and cohorts. The 3 C's, I would say. Any of this C drops out, you really do not have a D2C business offering, right? Because as you rightly said, your personality is your marketing and your content. So your personality is not built. Your cohort is the attraction, the gravity of your product and your customer service, your logistic, your delivery abilities, your brand promise, right? All of that sums up into the 1 point agenda, which is cohort. If they don't come back, then any of those are not meeting its, the legitimate conditions. And as I said that, clutter of content is there. People have moved away from television, so it's easier to reach out to people at lower cost. It's easier to reach out to millions of people at lower cost, courtesy again, Facebook ads, TikTok ads, Google ads, OTT ads. So your cost of impression is going to drop despite the large number of players. But unless you have a very differentiated communication strategy and differentiated content strategy, it'll not be noticed. So these 3 C's are very important. Company-wide or the brand-wide, whichever D2C brand it is, they need to set up the KPIs, common KPIs for all teams. So when you have product teams, technology team, marketing team, business teams, strategy team, one KPI set. And that KPI set has to cover these 3 C's. If you can figure that out in your own way and keep evolving, be agile, because your KPIs will also keep changing. I think there is a great opportunity right now, huge opportunity.
Advertising today can become expensive because you're competing with large brands with maybe an unlimited war chest to drive customers. Yeah. Content, of course, when you're driving traffic, nobody can beat you on content, right? Because that is something you can do really well for your audience if you understand them extremely well. How can brands differentiate, or is it possible to drive traffic with a lower cost of acquisition?
You have to park there, right? So, I mean, yeah, it's not a fair world, right? I mean, there are problems with discoveries, no doubt about that. And you will have to fight it out for the impressions. But with the right strategy, you can build it eventually. So spend little, earn little, spend a little bit more, earn a little bit more. So keep getting the cash rolling in and eventually park budgets in marketing. From my experience, we can park anything between 8 to 10% of your net sales. Over a period of time, you can build a brand. So if you're selling $100, park 10 rupees in marketing. When you're selling $1,000, park 9 rupees. When you're selling $1 million, then just park 6% of that. So it goes, basically the more you sell, eventually your marketing budget as a percentage of overall revenues can keep going down. So from an absolute baseline, start with 10%, and then eventually you can kind of plateau at 5 to 6%. Keep 5-6% always on because it's a competitive world. Do not go to 2 or 3%.
When you look at direct-to-consumer brands, they're overly reliant on a marketplace to also liquidate some of the inventory that they have and to keep cash flow. Though they don't really like the marketplace commissions, but they tend to use it as discovery and for liquidation.
Varun, they will have to rely more on marketplaces. They are not likely to get too much footfall. So the physical footfall is going to drop. Marketplaces will have an arbitrage to some extent. Now it really comes to the goodness of the values that you have in the company, right? Am I here to rob the small SMEs, or am I here to make sure that I can tag them along with me? There is an arbitrage for sure, because people will abstain from going into malls or larger retail outlets. They will even abstain from going into shopping complexes. So all those guys have to move their inventory, and they have to move through marketplaces. So the marketplaces were initially fishing for them, and there was this crazy rush between the 3 largest marketplaces in India and how many sellers they can get onboarded. So each of them was sitting at 375 to 400,000 odd sellers. Now each of them will be sitting on million plus sellers, and the sellers will come to them. They don't have to go after them right now. So they could probably draft terms which may not be completely in favor of sellers, but I think that's where the government has to step in and guard some policies. For example, you really can't punish the seller, or you can't stretch too much margins out of him, right? So if his net margins are under 25%, you really can't say that give me 30% plus discounting budget plus marketing budget. You can't do all that. There has to be certain guidelines to control it. Otherwise, some people might use it as an arbitrage. Yeah.
As a founder or a leader of a small startup in a direct-to-consumer brand space, how much should the founder be involved in marketing? Should they hire an agency? Should they hire folks who have done amazing things?
They should hire folks right now. Varun, there will be talent available in the market. They should hire people and do it on their own. I'm not against the model of agencies. Agencies is largely suited when you kind of become a global brand and you need a lot of geographical footprint. So you do not have physical ability to set up teams in different geographies at one go. So if tomorrow I'm selling in Dubai, Shanghai, United States, I may not have the capability to, set up the manpower in 6 months, 12 months. So then I can have a global agency who can partner me in different geographies. But if your business is local, as Prime Minister said, vocal for local. You have talent, hire people, get people, train them. So there could be a space for these education aggregators to get people like us to say train new marketing joiners. So there could be a set of people who say, okay, fine, I don't want to do any job, I want to train people, right? So they would kind of enroll themselves on these apps and the education apps where they can train the manpower, and the manpower should pick up the business on the go. That could be the new model wherein you would see a lot of experienced people would find the opportunity to pay it forward. And I think paying it forward is a very, very, very important role that now all of us have to instill in our hearts. So whatever I know about marketing, I need to pay it forward through the apps and help the new joiners of marketing who are joining small enterprises to, kind of ride tough waves, get them out of the situation. But I think there is talent available. So it's good to set up your own team right now.
How do you set up, how do you structure this team, with a small budget?
Give partnership. So work on a partnership. Try to give equity. Align people with your vision, and you could tell them that I may not be able to pay you right now, but I'm putting a part of this business and stake, and I'm giving you an equity of it, so the business grows and you grow along with it. And have some very smart exit and very helpful exit clauses, right? So you have to take your bet that this guy joined me today, I need him for 5 years, but in 5 years we can really go from point A to point B. Then make sure you're rewarding him well in 5 years. Your equity needs to grow, and his exit has to be soft, right? So if you can take care of these softer aspects, you can set up really, really good teams. But partially salary, I would say 60-70% base should be covered by net take home, and remaining 30-40% should be more of variables played on ESOPs.
And would you have one there's content folks, there's SEO, there's digital marketing, who manage online portals and keep the numbers in on a dashboard and so on. So what kind of roles do you think these founders should hire for?
I think the first and foremost is the data side. I mean, I'll not use the word data scientist because data scientist is the extreme of data gathering or data collation or data analysis, but data analyst, I would say, is single most important role right now, because without crunching the right numbers, you really can't come to the right campaigns. So the skill set number one is data analysis. Skill set number two is extraordinary art teams, right? So when I say art, I'm covering the entire gamut of designers, writers, content writers, feature writers, social media executives, people who can come in front of the camera and do the stories and represent themselves as a personification of the brand, and help people understand what the brand is all about. Those people in the art, I think these two form sets would be really, really critical right now.
And when you look at you mentioned hiring freshers or people who don't have experience and training them, and you talk a lot about this, about how you built your team at Nykaa as well. What kind of structure did you create to get them up to speed or being able to deliver, right? Because as in a small team, you want high performing individuals who will be able to deliver far greater value than that. Of course, since you're hiring hungry young folks, you're expecting that much more from them. So it's also important to enable them to also give that kind of
don't make them do what the other marketers are doing. Discover novel methods and tell them to work on the novel methods. They've not joined you to do marketing stuff that people in large corporations do. That's not a value add, because they can probably get a job in large corporations, a lot of them. They've joined you to do something which the large corporations are not doing. And that's one of the things that Nykaa always believed in. For example, a lot of large corporations do not have a CRM program like Nykaa has, right? Our customer retention program is state of art. The kind of email messaging or the kind of cohort building and the retargeting that we do is not to be practiced by a lot of larger corporations. Because a lot of larger corporations think and believe that we are so big that people will come back if we have the goods with us. But in a smaller corporation, we think people will not come back. So what are the hooks that you can create with marketing? So from my experience, the novel methods of retargeting that we created kind of gave a very big mojo to my team that they're doing something which is completely defining. And I think because of that, today their market value is really strong, right? So they also get a lot of calls to join webinars and conferences because everybody wants to know that what is the consumer segment you've created in your CRM programs? What is the consumer segment you've created in your notification programs? Now, these are our secret sauces, but it was developed over 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah.
Hitesh, you also talked about having one of the best consumer panels for Nykaa,
Yeah.
and you refer to this as your Telegram group that you've created, where you get some real-time insights. What was the genesis of that? How did that kind of take a life of its own?
How do you validate hypothesis, right? You build hypothesis basis data. For example, number of products selling in a category in a micro market dropping by 20%, right? That is a data point, right? So you create a hypothesis that this product is not liked by people anymore, or there is a better product available in the market at a cheaper price. There are two hypotheses you have built now. Now, if you don't have a panel to validate it, everything is an imagination. So then I can say, oh, the product is, it's not good because I don't like it. And you could say, no, product is good, but I think the other product is cheaper. So people are looking at it. And suddenly, after this hypothesis, you go to your panel and you ask what's going on, why it's not working well. And suddenly you will get response like, this product had a bad marketing strategy where we thought it's not ethical. So we thought it's not ethical for us to buy, so we are not buying it. This point was not even discussed in the hypothesis, which came out of data. So if you didn't have the panel, every decision that you would take around the product would be wrong. And again, I'm telling a very real example.
But how do you effectively conduct a panel? Because I would imagine, it's not easy to.
Your best customers a part of that should be a panel. Your best customers, the customers who have the best cohort with you, and the ones who are willing to talk to you, make a bridge with you, have regular conversations, and willing to be your micro influencers, that should be a panel.
So you touched upon micro influencer now. So I have to ask you this question. Influencers has been the talk of the town the last, I think, actually since 2011 when I think we engaged with them to write blogs and create, and of course over time it expanded to creating Insta videos, YouTube, and where they become brand ambassadors almost, where there seems to be some shift in thought, saying I don't want to listen to an influencer because it seems fake or not authentic as a communication.
Yeah, I mean, if 3 out of 10 influencers who got influenced naturally by the virtue of great product knowledge and the virtue of being generalist and virtue of being unbiased suddenly becomes biased, then it kind of spoils the entire basket. So that has happened, right? 20 or 30% of the influencers do work for money and only for brands and will do whatever is been asked to, the brands tell them to say. Now, the problem is, think about the other perspective. There is an influencer who spent thousands and lakhs of rupees, on content creation, on maybe content promotion to reach where she is. Now, today, if the only way she can monetize or she can get her money back is by partnering with brands, she kind of falls in the trap of, the brand diktat, right? That means a big brand will come to her and say, look, I'm going to give you a lakh for this video, but make sure you talk about these 3 points and no negative. Now, this does not happen in the United States, right? Because what they will do is, this is the product, take it up. If you like it, you could just go out and express about it. And then if you don't like the influencer, you don't work with the influencers next time. But you do not tell the influencer what to talk about. But here, what people or the brands did was that, look, I've got a gun. I'm pointing it towards you. If you talk right, that gun converts into a metal arm, a gold arm, and then, I'll keep extending my golden arm to you. Otherwise, it's a gun on top of your head. But these are difficult times, right? Not all the influencers are from affluent background, right? They have made investment and they probably never thought of a business initially, but it is a business, at the end of the day. So some people had to go that path and, people started losing interest, but everything is not that bad. There are still some very, very powerful, very strong, very respected influencers. And I think as long as that exists, influencer marketing will always be fine. It's just that the the idea of good influencer and bad influencer will keep changing.
In the influencer marketing space, and now it's become a space, and I think they're now classified into micro influencer and large influencer. How does a brand think about using influencers? Because I know it is also has become expensive. It used to be, hey, here is a product, here's a service, try it out, and if you like it, talk about us, right? And which I think is majority of why these influencers also do it, because they get to try new things, and they are the first ones to talk about it. And that's changed, right? Because now, like you're saying, there is cash involved and monetary incentives. So how should a brand think about it? And where do you think is there a line to be drawn?
First, when you're new, just give your products to influencer and tell them whatever you want to speak, talk about it. Just talk about us, because even if you say the product is not good, that's an input for us to improve. So go all out, build a relationship which is not on money, which is more on trust and respect. Look, I really like your content, but I'm giving you products to review. I don't expect you to talk great about me by the fact that I'm giving you the products. Talk whatever you want to talk about it, and whatever you talk about it, we'll take it as a feedback and we'll work on it. If it's good, we'll tap ourselves on the back. If it's not good, we'll try to work towards it. When you start with that, the influencers also start respecting you. In fact, most of them will not even ask for money, right? They will be happy with you making them a part of their business, right? Because you're listening to them, and the influencers are representing people at large. Start from there. Get some people on your side. Get some influencers really, really working closely with you. Eventually, then once you get into a big kick-ass launch or big kick-ass sale, then you can do bigger partnerships which are monetizable, right? Which you have to pay. But I think initially it's just relationship building, which means making them a part of your product decision journey through regular feedback. And I think respect for them right now is bigger than cash, to be honest.
Hitesh, where obviously when we talk about social media and marketing, we talk about the big three marketing channels, right? And now the new age, for a different audience, there are new channels that are coming up. What has been your favorite platform and why?
Instagram, no doubt about that. I mean, I think it is a platform where most of the shoppers are, to be honest. I can say 90% of people on Instagram shop online. So my business is to sell online, so I'll be biased. The same used to happen on Facebook, not anymore. No more than 60 to 70% of Facebook users shop online. Instagram is 90%. Maybe these dynamics will change in the next 5 years. So let's wait and watch.
So you're saying if somebody had a marketing budget, they should be spending more on Insta? Much more?
It also depends on what category of product they are into. So if their D2C brand is say only about basic hygiene wash or soap, so Instagram could be a good place for brand building, but the bread and butter will still come from Google search. They have to ensure the product shows up on territories where people are searching for them, YouTube and Google search, and a combination of both will be needed. Although if you're a little premium, if you're selling great insurance services, if you're selling outstanding motor car parts, if you're selling great clothes, great fashion, definitely Instagram.
As a marketer, any campaigns that really stood out in the recent past? I mean, we obviously have a lot of older ones which are classic, right? Classic marketing campaigns. You would remember, I know, Amul, Little Ads, a bunch of others.
I think the Mercedes electric is a kick-ass campaign. It's pretty good. They partnered with an influencer. I'm not Weekend actually, right? So Weekend is the influencer. The blinding light campaign.
Sure.
The story of that was that it's always a BMW versus Mercedes war, right? And I am very close to this war because I'm a user of one of the product. So there was a time when BMW was lagging behind and Mercedes was the choice of everybody who could afford a premium car or luxury car. And then suddenly BMW came out with these outstanding payment plans, which got larger section of people to buy it. And then Mercedes said that the new definition of luxury is not going to be the space or the look, but the technology or the sustainability, right? So in short, what Tesla did for the world was maybe kind of a new definition of luxury automobile. So the Mercedes had a one-up with their electric car launch, and they wanted to make a big bang. So they launched this campaign partnering with The Weeknd, the song "Blinding Lights," where they showed the evolution of Mercedes right from inception till they reached to the electric car, all packaged into a very yuppie 3-minute number, a 3-minute soundtrack. You should watch that video on YouTube. Now, what it does, it not only tells you how they started and how they partnered along with every new technology or the new thing that came to automobile, they were also ahead of the curve in terms of the user aspiration. Right? For example, a very brief moment in their ad shows about a woman winning a race. Right? Something something like a long circuit races that happen across France or across countryside. So they show a lady who comes out, a person who comes out of a car, takes out the helmet, and it's a woman, right? So they're showing a lot of different aspects also in that ad, which kind of again personifies what the brand stands for. And I really feel that with that campaign, they will have a lot of takers for the electric vehicle. Now, if you compare this to BMW's electric vehicle campaign, it focused more on talking technology, where there's a lady who's talking and the car is lost in the woods. Doesn't have that impact. So you should watch it actually. So both the cars launch electric. Watch the BMW electric versus the Mercedes electric campaign with The Weeknd. Great campaign, I would say.
Okay, Cass. In the new world order, what do you think are some of the traits that a CMO should have, and how do you recommend a young CMO or aspiring CMO to kind of build on their skills?
Omni-channel ability to capture customers. Same customer needs to be wooed offline, online, because now the lines will become very blurred, right? So the customer's intent to shop something online after checking it offline, or vice versa, is going to happen. So how do you attract a customer omni-channel, irrespective of wherever the touch point is going to be the largest skill of a marketer, which means what are the tools he or she is deploying to ensure that she gets one customer view. I think that's number one. Number two, the eye for content. As I said earlier, if you don't have the eye, it's very difficult for you to be a successful marketer today. And last but not the least, people relationship, team members relationship. How do you make the team believe that you're doing something novel, something totally clutter breaking, something totally path breaking, and how everybody could be a part of the story in one marketing team. I think these are the three very, very important things post-corona.
Do you think a lot of these online properties, you have the Big Billion Day sale, you have, well, it was for the longest time Lakme India Fashion Week, which, there's a co-branding, and you kind of define your brand, and also you use that as a way for more people to hear about you and associate yourself with. Is it still relevant? Do people, is it worth investing in those kind of properties and creating, because this is not your core business?
Yeah, it is. So creation of IP is going to be big, right? So IP could be anything. IP could be a virtual fashion show to maybe a makeup event, right? IPs are very important part of brand building, because you're sometimes known more by your IPs than the brand name itself. And then numerous examples. Red Bull is a classic example. Red Bull is more of an IP than just a energy drink. Red Bull is more of a brand sending a person to space and asking to drop off than just asking people to drink energy drinks. Or Red Bull gives you wing. Red Bull has set the stage that how classic IPs stay with you forever. And if your IP reaches the level that they achieved, then you kind of become, a permanent brand, right? Then you never die. But again, don't get lost in that. So every day when a marketer wakes up, especially in a big firm, he or she will get 1,000 calls for sponsorships. Don't sponsor, create IPs, right? So don't just say that, I'm sponsoring a school education fair because I want to, support kids. That's like a very, a very tiny, very impermanent campaign that you would do. I would rather, change the schooling system using my brand. If I'm an online education app, what can I do for primary school that people can use me? And now that is creating IP. Can I introduce new courses on my app that can be presented in schools? That's not sponsorship. So I think the age of sponsorship will die. The age of IP will reemerge and will come out very strongly.
That's an interesting thought. I believe, I totally forgot Red Bull was launched being an adrenaline associated item, right? And I think it was probably one of the most grueling races that they had sponsored. And I think the story goes that all of Austria was glued to their TVs, and they saw Red Bull everywhere as a logo and a brand, and they couldn't miss it, even though Red Bull was never mentioned, or they didn't show anybody drinking the Red Bull, they didn't show any of that, but just that the presence of the brand on that race, on jerseys, on hoardings, on different things, just offered just a very different perspective to how a brand can be communicated. That's a fairly interesting point.
0.006% of Ferrari enthusiasts own a Ferrari. They'll have a Ferrari T-shirt. They'll have Ferrari sunglasses. Only 0.006% have the real product, which is a Ferrari car.
I remember a time when there was so many, you used to buy from surplus stores or anything. You could buy like a Ferrari T-shirt, right? For 200-300 rupees back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's free. That's free marketing, right? Technically, because people are seeing your logo everywhere.
But again, because they created IPs. They created IPs, right? So it's again all about IPs.
That's an interesting way. I mean, somebody mentioned, I think Louis Vuitton, probably one of the biggest beneficiaries of, fake products, because even though there's so many knockoffs of the brand, LV, but they're the biggest beneficiaries of the knockoffs as well, because those are
publicity.
And they also say imitation is the best form of
flattery.
Yeah. So it's a brilliant thought. Hey Hitesh, this has been great. Do you have any parting words for our audience?
By the time this is published, things probably will be worse in terms of what's happening around us with coronavirus, and things could be worse in terms of the perception of what economy will shape out like. But as I said, that at least in this country, demand is going to be one constant thing, but the nature of demand will change. So watch that very carefully, and think of creating the next Zoom that you and I are talking about. Think of creating the next Hangout, or think of creating the next WhatsApp. And I think those are the businesses which will again employ the next million people. So for all the maybe unfortunate million people who are not gonna have jobs in next 2-3 months, don't think you're not good. Just think that your business is not good anymore, right? Maybe your food delivery is not good anymore. Maybe your restaurant events is not good anymore. And just keep your eyes open that what's going to be good next, right? So on one side, if you have food delivery apps firing thousands of people, or your cab aggregator apps firing thousands of people, on the other hand, you'll suddenly have the electric vehicles company or the electric two-wheelers company hiring thousands of people, right? And that's gonna be a thing, right? There was a time when shared economy became big and people said, let's live on apartments that we don't own, and let's ride in cars that we don't own, right? And then the shared economy factor came in. Now people would want to maintain distance, right? So they would not want to get into that format, which doesn't mean that there will be no market, but the markets will change, right? And people will say, let me get an electric bicycle and bicycle to work now, right? Let me get an electric car, a two-seater car, and which is like under ₹1 lakh and head to work. So these kind of shifts will happen now.
So everyone has to relearn what they think they know, and they have to evolve.
Yeah, actually, and we're lucky, Varun, that we could see this in our prime of our youth, because every lifetime will have one major calamity or event, right? For example, our parents have seen the emergency, or they've seen earthquake, natural disasters, and maybe worse diseases, right? Polio pandemic, or maybe tuberculosis pandemic, right? And then they came out of it. There were world wars, and the European nations came out of it and became EU. So it's good that our share of calamity has come in our prime, so that we can rebuild it and rebuild it together. Because sometimes when you reach a certain age, you don't even want to rebuild it, right? And here I think it is an opportunity to rebuild it completely.
I think our parents had never seen this kind of an impact.
No, trust me. They'd seen worse times. They'd seen an Indian market which nobody wanted to come to. they'd seen an Indian market where we had to mortgage our gold. 1989, 1990. Nothing can be worse.
No, I mean,
nothing can be worse.
See, when you don't know, when you don't know, when you don't know.
1991, prior to me.
No, my point.
It was so bad.
See, if you didn't know better, right? Then you feel like this is business as usual.
But that's what the virus is telling us, that we didn't know better, that going to office is a mundane proposition. Build teams, hire people, but you don't need an office. The virus is telling us that. That's a better way.
On that note, thanks, Hitesh.
Yeah.
This has been
Thanks,
awesome.
Varun.
You can find Hitesh on LinkedIn. He's quite active, and actually he's quite active on all social media handles. So you can find him. I will leave some of the links in show notes. If you'd like me to speak with any specific founders, or there's a founder doing amazing things, do send me a message. Would love to see if we can have them on the show. Of course, did you like the banter? Today we had a little bit more banter than normal. So let me know in the comments if you like the banter or didn't. Just send me a tweet on Varun Vumidi. You can find me on Twitter at Varun Vumidi. And of course, if you haven't already left me a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast player, do leave me a rating so others can find the show. And of course, subscribe if you haven't already done that. Thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.